Hello, and welcome back to the ongoing discussion of Saga of the Swamp Thing. We're going to be discussing Book 6 today. And as people probably are aware, this is the Alan Moore run of Swamp Thing. We're going to go quickly and skip the introductions because we assume you know us, but it's in this case, it's myself, Mike, and we have Varsha and Jared. Doesn't look like Steve will be joining us today, although he did share a few thoughts on the series that I could share. So yeah, maybe we just kind of get into it. This is the very final volume, and what are any overall impressions? Anybody want to start us off?
Well, yeah, Mike, this is Alan Moore's foray into science fiction. Basically,
Mm-hmm.
he moves the Swamp Thing from a horror creature in the horror genre into a kind of sci-fi spacefaring spore, I guess. And I'm not sure how it worked. It was kind of strange. He and that's a real pun.
Yeah, Adam Strange.
He runs into Adam Strange, and it's, I don't know if he wanted to introduce some of the DC space characters, that existed, and kind of play around with them, and because we had the plant-based Green Lantern in here, and we had and Adam Strange, and we had the Hawkman and Hawkgirl as well from I forget the name of that planet, but so that was, it was interesting. It wasn't the high point of a storytelling. And he also had the new gods in here, Metron and Darkseid, and that was interesting. It was interesting seeing how he was trying to portray the Swamp Thing's abilities and powers in those kind of settings, giving him this really high elemental status that isn't just confined to Earth. It's universal, so to speak.
Yeah, that's I think that's very well said. What about you, Varsha? What did you think?
Yeah, I rather enjoyed the jaunting off into space and the various planets.
Jaunting. You said jaunting.
Yes, that's true. Yes, I did. Good sci-fi pun there. But yeah, I enjoyed the planet to planet, but I was ready for it to be over by about the fourth time we changed perspectives. The one with the metallic mineral weird semi-organic metallic island was interesting. Their origin story, not what happened to the Swamp Thing there, but yeah, I enjoyed the different species and the planets and their characteristics that we were given, and some of it was vastly different from humans, like that mineral island, sentient island thing. But the others, like even the plant creatures, they had heads of feathers, and they dressed themselves up the way humans do. I guess they're close enough to humans, and maybe that's why the Swamp Thing can get help from them. So yeah, it was interesting, and I thought ignorantly that we were done with the DC connections, but apparently not, because we met a whole bunch of characters that I wasn't familiar with. I knew the name the Green Lantern though, so then I had to go back and rethink everything else that happened before about whether those were also jaunts into planets that have people that are part of the DC universe. But in my ignorance, I was able to enjoy the story for not having the forced in DC connections. They just read to me like just like ran nice sci-fi short stories, if that makes sense.
That's interesting. I was wondering about somebody who's not familiar with the DC universe, well, how you would react to that, to the Adam Strange and the Hawkman and stuff like that. Because it is there is some sort of those of us who are familiar with those characters have this kind of foreknowledge of what they're about a little bit, whereas you wouldn't have that at all. But it's nice that you were able to enjoy them in spite of not having that
Yeah.
foreknowledge going in. Yeah.
Yeah. Possibly because of not knowing that, because I think the bit that I was least enjoying in the last 5 volumes was all the DC characters that I knew of being inserted into the story to, as far as I could tell, no end. And here, actually here it even feels more purposeful because he's like traveling planet to planet. So, I don't know if I would have allowed that irritation to carry into the story if I had known about the DC references.
Yeah. No, I think it's for me. I was not familiar with Adam Strange, but I was familiar, I think, with a lot of the other characters. But we didn't get any Batman this time. So I actually thought it was cool that we got some new characters that Swamp Thing had not interacted with before. But my overall impression was I was a little bit disappointed that Alan Moore does not write 2 of the issues, so he's missing in what is essentially 1/4 of this volume. So I was a little bit, I don't know, I can't say I was bummed per se, because one of the stories I actually liked and the other one maybe I didn't like very much. But I did read, I think I read in the, what is it called? How they, at the beginning, there's like these, the foreword.
Yeah.
It said something about how this is Alan Moore's take on the Odyssey in space, Homer's Odyssey, which I didn't catch while reading, but I thought that was interesting to mention at the beginning. But I had my ups and downs for sure. There was, I would say, out of all of these volumes, this might have been my least favorite or second to least favorite. And I think it's just maybe just because it was a little bit all over the place, but you got to hand it to him. Alan Moore was trying new things. He was doing different things with the character and taking him into new directions. And one of the issues, which is kind of like a tone poem, which is really interesting, I thought I'd mention, is I think it's called "Loving the Alien." It's basically like, I think you had mentioned it, Jared. He's kind of like he's in space. He's but initially we're introduced to this weird planet / I don't know what you call it, planet / AI type of being that is waiting for their lover, and it happens to be Swamp Thing. It doesn't really go very well for Swamp Thing, but it's done in such a, the writing, the prose is so different. It's essential, and then you don't really have any dialogue. It's I have to call that one out because that one was really, really avant-garde, I think, probably at the time.
Yeah. No, that's very interesting. You mentioned the Odyssey because now looking back at it, he was in a big war, a big war for heaven or what have you. So that was basically like his Trojan War. And then he got shunted off into space. And it took how many years to get back to his queen,
Exactly.
Abby. So it kind of fits in with that whole Odyssey thing fits. And the very issue you were just talking about now is kind of like that call of the sirens that Odysseus had to go through. with having to resist that call and not just get sucked into that place forever. And that's quite that it actually kind of makes it better, the whole thing.
Yeah, I appreciated that more once I
appreciate
learned
that a lot. Yeah,
I
and
I agree.
Yeah, and you're right. That particular issue where it was a whole bunch of blocks of text, was probably the first instance of Alan Moore showing off what he would do with prose if he was to do prose writing. And that kind of writing is something that if you follow his career, you'll run into more of. He uses a lot of strange, wacky words. He uses a lot of stuff like snarling feral organisms emerging from the skin. Just really visceral language that his sentences kind of run on with a lot of adjectives describing different things that a lot of it's quite unique. His prose is quite unique among writers. He doesn't follow the rules a lot. Well, you can tell he knows the rules, and he just really likes to twist a lot of his imagery and words and use them in ways that's different, really different. Because I'm reading his novel, The Great Wind, right now, and it's like that. His prose is just unique among everybody, and you see the start of it here in Swamp Thing, and he does it quite a bit in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. He does short stories in the back of those issues where he uses this kind of prose. And he does it in some of his short stories collections that he's written in prose too. Yeah.
It's kind of like postmodern kind of stuff, I think. Yeah, not so linear, maybe.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I think I read his 10 favorite. I don't know where it was published, but he had shared some of his favorite books, and some of them were like Infinite Jest and things like that are kind of go on and Jerusalem is 1,200 pages or something. I don't know. But I own that one. I do not own The Great Wen, but I'm curious to hear what you think maybe after this at some point, or after you finish it. Any other maybe any highlights or other issues that people wanted to talk or moments that you liked, or
the one with the Mobius chair? I'm guessing that's another DC character, is it?
Yes. As Metron, he's one of the new gods. His boss is Darkseid. Or Darkseid, however you say that. And that was very interesting.
Yeah.
That section.
Yeah, I like that.
Where he was able to actually penetrate the wall there and go inside of it, because that was something. That wall is a character in and of itself in the DC universe.
Oh, interesting.
And it's always something that Darkseid, as the evil god of whatever he's the evil god of Apocalypse, it's always something that he wanted to use to exploit the ultimate equation that he's always looking for to conquer the universe or something. And the fact that Swamp Thing had this unique ability to go in there and and not quite, it didn't seem like he really realized what he was doing when he was doing that. And he was taking Metron with him, and he's trying, they were trying to figure stuff out. I don't exactly remember all that happened in that issue, but it was interesting, very interesting.
He seemed to have been almost hypnotized by a tape or a calculator, I think, the mother box they
The mother
called it.
box, yeah.
And they went to find the source, which at first they went to the edge of the universe, I think, where there were these beings that had these razor things that were apparently repurposing the compost. That's the compost bin of the universe. They were repurposing the random pieces of debris into geological, into cosmic objects. And then they went to the other side and they had a moment where they experienced the Aleph, which was something through which you can see all of existence and all of time in one instant or something like that. There is a Borges story named Aleph. I wondered if this was influenced by that or if Aleph has a common meaning that they both used. But yeah, that one I found very interesting. Again, no idea who the characters were, but I enjoyed the play with space-time and the trying to find the source, which is like, I guess, some sort of black hole perhaps. And then that would explain why they were able to see everything in one instant. But yeah, but then like when they went to extract his experience of the Aleph, it turned out that most of his focus was Abby, and he was trying to remember her and his life with her, and like was getting some images of her even as she is right now without him, which was sweet, but also I'm like, yeah, okay. But yeah, but I enjoyed that issue quite a lot.
And that was written by Rick Bache. I don't know how to pronounce his name.
That's the one called Wavelength.
Yep. So
yeah, he's the artist on a few of these too.
Yeah.
So
I think you another highlight for me. Well, my favorite actually, and you had already mentioned it, Barsha, which is when he I think it's just before Wavelength. The issue is called All Flesh is Grass, and he goes to planet J586,
yeah,
which is the plant-based planet. You know, the people are made of plants, and then animals are used as, I don't know. There was a few panels where you see animals being used for various things, like bouquets of flowers or hummingbirds.
Yeah.
You'd already mentioned the Green Lantern character who was like a carrot head.
Yeah.
Is he the Green Lantern or is he a variation of the Green Lantern?
He's a Green
He's a lantern. Yep.
I see.
Yeah.
And Green Lantern is a multiple, like that's how they're written, or is it?
No, there's a whole core of Green Lanterns. The Green Lantern that we know is the Green Lantern for Earth.
Yeah.
But there's Green Lanterns for every planet or civilization or what have you.
I see. Okay, interesting.
Exactly. But I found that one to be the most horrific because, as we know, Swamp Thing can he can morph into anything that's plant, organic or plant material, and then so he kind of like sucks up these beings. So it was there was some beautiful artwork in here as well. Where, but I really thought, for me, this was one of the most imaginative, it
was pretty wild.
It was out there.
I really love that that panel in that issue that shows the it was supposed to be this piece of artwork that was also like a cave, but it was also a mouth.
Oh yeah,
and you can see like the tree stumps are actually look like teeth, and it was just like the cave was just, it was a mouth you would go. It was Swamp Thing's mouth, I believe.
Yeah.
And it was just, I just thought it was hilarious how they did that. And it was, yeah, really cool artwork, throughout all these.
The Swamp Thing's soul, I didn't realize it in the Green Lantern one, but in a later, I was gonna say episode, issue, the way it was drawn, it made me realize it's supposed to be the 7 chakras because there are 7 wheel things. That was pretty cool.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
You're right. You're right.
You're right. Yeah.
And I like the bit of closure that the Green Lantern character got with the help of the Swamp Thing from his separated lover. I love the sort of human, quote unquote human element in these stories, like there's planet scale events that are happening and people trying to fight the Swamp Thing and stop him from destroying unwittingly the entire planet. But meanwhile, there's this couple that's realizing that their affections for each other don't go as deep as they thought, and there's this character who's unable to get over the loss of his partner and is using and now is able to get some closure with the help of the Swamp Thing. So I really love those tiny human moments in this section.
Yeah, it was I like the end of that issue where Adam Strange shows up on Earth and he tries to go and tell Abby, hey, Swamp Thing's coming, he'll be back. And she's like, get out of here, you crazy loon,
Yeah, because he's saying things that she clearly doesn't believe.
Yeah. And, I mean, could you imagine that? Like some strange guy shows up at your door, and she already had a problem with like the media and stuff, about her being with a monster in the swamp and what have you. And so of course she's gonna think it's just some loon trying to capitalize on her her trauma that she's already had, And so
that makes sense. I was wondering why she's being so disbelieving when, there's a swamp monster that, that is her husband. But now that makes sense that she thinks that people are coming here to make fun of her.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So yeah, and I was like, oh, that makes perfect sense because, I mean, what would you think? Just some strange guy. He's got like a sling, He's kind of beat up, and he just shows up and says, "Yeah, I know your guy. He's gonna be on a Zeta beam, and he's gonna show up." And
yeah,
it's like,
sure,
okay, pal,
get out.
Yeah. Yeah. So just a little nice touch there.
Yeah. I really like that.
Eventually, though, he does show up.
That he does. I love that I love that his coming back is just a bunch of roses, which I assume are for Abby. But then, he's using them to an overgrowth of roses to take his revenge on the people who hurt him.
Yeah.
I thought I was a little bit, if we're talking about kind of the last, the end, Return of the Good Gumbo, I wondered why she really didn't seem to care about what happened to him. I don't know. I just noticed she was she's just like, look at this boat. I wish I had a boat in this river.
Yeah.
I thought that was a little bit weird. I don't know.
He says, I'm not going to bore you with stories of my time in space. And she's like, yeah, let's move on and talk about something else. What? I mean, you're agreeing with him that his time in space is boring? I mean, maybe it is for her, but I don't understand it. We're not on the same wavelength here.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. And then she's like, oh, give me a sweet potato off your body so I can get high. I can get high and
well, that's how they have sex, I guess.
Yeah.
In the issue just before, I didn't really, this one I didn't really work for me, but she's back with her. I think she's still married to this guy, but he's essentially like a vegetable. I don't know if that was meant as a joke or what.
Ironically,
Yeah, I think it was
Yeah.
meant as ironic. I
I
didn't.
thought she meant the swamp thing, and it took me a while to realize
Yeah,
she meant the other
exactly.
guy.
Yeah, but I kind of forgot about him. I was like, I don't really know why they brought him back, but maybe it was showing that she was kind of going on with her life or whatever. It goes all the way back to like the volume 1.
Yeah, I mean, there was something about closure, you know.
Yeah. Okay.
Loose ends
Right.
reprise, you know. So that was the name of it, and so I guess he was just trying to tie up stuff from his whole run because he knew this was it. This is the last. You know, that's why he was going after all his enemies with the roses and stuff. He was tying up those loose ends, and he was tying up the loose end of her husband, her ex or soon-to-be ex-husband, what have you, and he was also tying up the loose end of her guest, her ward that she was taking care of, and she kind of played matchmaker with the marijuana deal there, but and so you know that's kind of what he was doing there. That seems to me. I don't know who that French guy was at the end, though.
He's a Cajun character, I think, that might have appeared. Maybe we saw him before. I did not go back. I wasn't going to go back, but I thought maybe we had seen him before.
What did you guys think of Abby's father turning out to be a different kind of swamp monster? And
I didn't like that.
I love the Frankenstein reference there, though.
Yeah, it was definitely a Frankenstein reference, but man, it was weird.
That was weird. It was out there.
Yeah. Did it feel like it almost came out of nowhere? Just explaining her long affinity for swamp monsters, I guess. Or is that another DC reference we're supposed to get? Like the uncle, he seemed to be some big dude.
Yeah.
What was his name? Anton?
Anton. And that one was actually written by Steve Bissette. It was not written by Alan Moore, that issue. And Steve Bissette was the original artist on this run. And yeah, I kind of, this one kind of threw me off a little bit. I was just kind of like, okay, they show her childhood and she's kind of playing with is that her father?
And then kind of creepy relationship.
Yeah. And then his father is the monster who's remembering this, you know, her childhood, and it was strange. Yeah, it was very
trying
strange.
to do maybe too much. I don't know. That was maybe my least favorite out of all of these. I thought I saw some. I think we've said this before, but I saw some, like the scene in hell resembled Sandman. Is it the same artist or not? I don't know. Some of these artists overlap, but the Sandman, at least the first few volumes. And another Sandman similarity for me is that the planet with the vegetables, the looked like the Corinthian character was the cover of that issue. I think the eyes were like mouths or something.
The Corinthians' eyes are teeth. Yeah.
There was some similarities. Anyway, I just kind of random, but looking at it right now, and that's the cover though. For me, it's page 105, but that's actually pretty scary. I don't know. So that's some similarities I felt, but that's been a kind of an ongoing theme that we've been discussing, I think.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, right. Yeah, the cover of issue 61.
Yeah.
But that had to do with the plant people. With that's related to that whole cave thing I was showing you earlier
Mm-hmm.
with the teeth in the mouth and the people walking into the cave.
He's also wearing the Green Lantern ring.
Yeah, the Green Lantern ring, yeah, on that cover, yeah.
I will share a disappointment. I think we talked about this a while back, but do you remember the Parliament of the Trees? I was hoping they were going to go back at the end, but I guess because I'm sure DC said to Alan Moore or whatever, like, this series is going to continue without you, and because essentially what happened in that Parliament of Trees was those other Swamp Things, those entities, the wood nymph or whatever, they just kind of retire there and just chill.
Yeah.
Is that I was wondering if that was going to happen here. So I was I don't know if maybe it's not disappointed, but I was just hoping to revisit that. It was one of my favorite issues. I think it was 3rd volume or 4th volume.
Yeah, I remember that. I don't ever recall seeing that again. So
okay.
I mean, I haven't read everything, but I know the Swamp Thing shows up quite a bit in the Hellblazer comic. Sometimes, and like because John Constantine obviously originated in the Swamp Thing issues, the ones we read earlier. But I know like you said, the Swamp Thing series kept going.
Oh yeah, still going.
And it's had a couple. It's had a couple other. It stopped and had a couple other starts and stops and stuff like that over the years. So they may have revisited in one of those other series, but not that I'm aware of. I didn't even know about it in the first place until we read it in this series, anyways. But
I'll just ask you, Jared, if you've continued on with the series, are there any other runs that you would recommend? Or I know
I have not. No, I have
okay.
Not. The only thing I have read a few of the original series with Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson from the early 70s, and those are pretty cool.
Yeah.
They're more horror based, and they're more Swamp Thing is a monster based type storytelling. Whereas Alan Moore made Swamp Thing more a part of the DC universe and part of more of a misunderstood creature type thing.
Yeah.
An elemental, so to speak.
I wondered, did the further runs continue to expand or use the powers that he now has? Or did they go back to the previous version of the story?
No, it definitely was a continuation of this.
Okay.
This series kept going after Alan Moore left, so this ended with this volume here ended with issue 64.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so there was an issue 65. It was just written by somebody else, and there was a new team or whatever. And I never read it, so I don't know what happens. But and then it did stop at some point, and then he appeared in other books within the DC Vertigo, universe. Hellblazer being one of them, with John Constantine, and he appeared in some other ones too, as a side character. And he's also had his own series here and there, off and on over the years.
Yeah. Anything else we wanted to say? I thought we could also kind of end this and think of, would we recommend the series, but I'll just hear from any of you. Is there anything else you wanted to mention that you liked or didn't like, or thoughts you had?
I mean, overall, I think it's incredibly imaginative. I think Alan Moore had a lot of stuff to work with here, where he was trying to integrate it into what we've been over that as far as integrating into the DC universe and what have you. He was straddling a line between the mature reader comic that was a new thing in the 80s and still being relatable to what was being published at the time. So I think it's an interesting piece of comic book history, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's difficult to compare this to like Watchmen or whatever, because it's like you said very well, Jared. He's straddling other things and dealing with the broader DC universe, and it's not his own thing. But he did really interesting things, and we've talked about in the past how he did a lot of social commentary as well on environmental issues, racism and slavery, I think, and I don't know if there was as much in this volume as there was in the past, but yeah, he really explored some creative ideas, and well, I mean, he did some highly experimental work with what's it called? The issue is called "Loving the Alien," where you have that. I had actually written down. It's like a biomechanical being that's seeking a mate, I guess. That was just, and as you mentioned, the writing, the prose, and the way the imagery is. Each page is like its own, could be its own, artwork on its own. It's really, really well done. But I hadn't really seen anything like that. I know I probably have, but this might have been the first time you'd seen that type of experimental work. So I appreciated that. I appreciate that Alan Moore in many cases like really did swing for the fences or whatever. But it didn't always, wasn't always as cohesive. But yeah. Any wrapping up kind of thoughts, Varsha, for you?
Yeah, I think he did a pretty good job of sort of wrapping up his run. Like we talked about the loose end stuff, and he ended on the same note that we started out with, right? The environmental issues have been sort of at the forefront, and I think we touched upon them obliquely in some cases, like the planet that he helped recover from the famine, which then led to his big inner soliloquy in the end, where he considers whether he can just go and deal with all the famines and issues that have come about due to human negligence of the environment. And he decides to himself, no, I'm not going to do that because I'm not letting them learn for themselves. So I think he sort of ended on the note that he started on, had his say about the environment, and like it felt like a good story. And I haven't read anything else by Alan Moore. Have I? Yeah, I've read V for Vendetta, but I haven't read anything else in the DC universe. I don't think Sandman, yes, but there aren't any references here that are referred to here. So the parts that worked around that, I think he did brilliantly. The parts that integrated with those, I couldn't connect with for not being familiar with the characters, or because they didn't feel like they warranted an entry into the story. But apart from that, I think, yeah, I did really enjoy reading it. I don't know who I'd recommend it to, because like I'm not a comic book reader and I enjoyed it, but yeah, I'm happy. I'm glad to have read it. I'm glad to have made myself familiar with more of Alan Moore's work. I've been told by all of you that everything else is much better than this. So I'm kind of excited to read Watchmen, and League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is him too, right? And yeah, all his other works.
Yeah. It's this is it's interesting because it is a big part of comic book lore to have this as part of your repertoire of things that classic things that you have read, and it's kind of strange that it's not his best work, that you can but it's still considered seminal as part of, because it launched the Vertigo DC universe. Basically, it launched Vertigo. This type of storytelling wasn't done before, where it was geared toward the more mature reader, and this is what started it. This is what allowed Sandman to exist. This is what allowed Hellblazer to exist. And so it's because of this. This was it was innovative in that sense, and it was the precursor to that mature readers label that DC eventually put out, because there was a demand for it. There was, people enjoyed it. They said, wow, we want more of this. And that launched that aspect of comic book storytelling that veered into a more mature reader taste. And it took comics away from superheroes, because you could tell that Moore was simply using the superheroes as a because he was probably mandated to editorially, but also he was using them in a way that wasn't typical to how they were used in superhero comics when he did use them. And they were sideshows. They were side characters. They weren't integral to the what he was trying to get across with the Swamp Thing character. They and so it was really unique in that respect. It was groundbreaking in that respect. So you can look at it from that point of view. And the artwork was, like you said, Mike, really spectacular. There's a lot of these single pages that you could frame and put on a wall because of how beautiful they are and how fantastic the artwork was in a lot of these volumes that we read.
Yeah, well, I think that's a really good note to end on, because we don't have Steve. I will mention that I think he was maybe a little bit disappointed in the overall series, but I hope that he was happy to have read it. I know that I was. But again, because we don't have Steve, he usually does the kind of closing out. Is that something you would be able to do, Marcia, for us?
Sure, yeah. I guess you'll catch more episodes like this on the Panel Chewing podcast, which all three, Steve, Mike, and Jared, are all veterans of. And I guess I occasionally pop in there, and some of the other Page Chewing members do too. If you'd like to join us for any of these discussions or any of the other reading groups that we've got going on the Page Chewing forum, consider checking out the forum and checking out the scheduling there for anything that you might be interested in. So yeah, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you shortly on any of the, 24 podcasts that I guess we've got going on through the forum. Thank you so much. Bye.